CEO, thank you very much. Thank you in particular to Ambassador Julian for those inspiring words and for our partnership, and also for the Director General of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We're really delighted that you were able to come. And thank you all for coming here. And it's great to see, under our direction of our great leader here, our Executive Director, we have had to get to a bigger venue than last year. And I'm sure even more will be coming in the years to come. This is the 14th year that we have launched the Global Hunger Index. And every year we try and link it in to a global trend or a global event. So we have looked at hunger through the lens of gender, through the lens of conflict, inequality, displacement, and now climate change. And climate change is now recognized as a key driver and multiplier of poverty, hunger, and displacement. And I think this year, more than ever, climate change has been at the top of the agenda, not just the political agenda, but the agenda for young people across the world. And I was privileged last September to be part of the Irish delegation that went to New York for the Climate Summit. And this year, it was really a unique event. And it was unique that this was the first time in the UN, in their history, that the Climate Summit was dedicated and led by young people. So people like me, older people, weren't even allowed into the main chamber. We had to sit in a smaller room watching the events. But it was really exciting to be there. And expectations were running very high because in the lead up to that, there had been across 150 countries protests and campaigns, including here in Korea, led by young people and inspired by the 16-year-old young activist Greta Thunberg, who spoke so powerfully at the Climate Summit. So, did the summit deliver? I mean, the simple answer is no, or more correctly, not enough. And while it did not live up to the sense of urgency and call for radical change that preceded it, it would be wrong to dismiss the summit as a failure. It's true that there were no big new commitments, especially coming from the world's biggest players and in some cases biggest contributors to CO2. China, the US, and the UK either said very little or nothing at all. And while Russia said it would ratify the Paris Agreement, it added nothing more on how it would cut emissions. However, there was good news. 77 smaller countries, including Ireland, announced plans to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And many more agreed to build on their commitments to the Paris Change Agreement by next year. Importantly, Korea was among a group of nations that committed to doubling their funding for the UN Green Climate Fund. And this fund was established in 2010 to support practical, innovative solutions in developing countries, such as renewable microgrids in Mali, or the construction of flood seawalls in the Pacific island of Tuvalu, which is the planet's fourth smallest nation and is potentially facing extinction as a result of rising sea levels. These are the places on the front lines of climate breakdown right now, and this is where action is most urgent and where support is most needed. But ultimately, I think what the Climate Summit may be remembered for is that smaller nations stepped up and reaffirmed their collective commitment to multilateralism, as larger nations didn't. The summit, of course, was a reminder that we all have to change our way of thinking about global issues. Individuals, corporations, governments, there's no longer a choice, and including NGOs. And as NGOs and as humanitarians, we have a duty to speak up for the communities where climate change is already taking a deadly toll. And as Ambassador Clary clearly said, the greatest injustice of climate change is that those who have done the least to cause it are being hit first and hardest. Take Turkana in Kenya. Serious drought today is now forcing families into desperation. And these communities would have experienced droughts every 10 to 15 years, and now it's every 2, and they have no time to recover. One woman who was interviewed by Concern was unable to leave her home and collect firewood to earn enough money to feed her children. And she was forced to take the cowhides that had lined her hut wall and boil and bake those. Now, this is something that no one should have to do to feed their children. But thankfully, these families, along with 5,500 other families in that area, are being supported by Concern with small monthly cash allowances that enable them to have 2 simple meals a day. 2019 will be remembered surely as the year of climate change protest, but for Concern in the communities we work with, it's not new, and we've been working for decades on solutions to the effects of climate change and bringing them to scale. Solutions that are taking farmers from producing enough to feed their family to becoming small businesses of the future. And over the last 3 years, with funding from Irish Aid, from many others, we have brought training and new techniques to 480,000 farmers across 18 countries. In Malawi, women who participated in Concern's Conservation Agriculture Programme were able to double their harvest yields and at the same time reduce their workload by 34 days a year. Now, imagine now having the ability to have 34 days where you don't have to be in the field. It doesn't mean that you have 34 days holiday, but that's your choice. And time off is not a gift, it's not a luxury, it's a right. So much is being achieved, but I think this year's Global Hunger Index will also show that 47 countries are still have serious or alarming levels of hunger, and one in particular, Central African Republic, is categorized as extremely alarming. In the last 3 years, actually quite depressing in a way, because conflict and climate change now is reversing some of the gains. And the number of hungry people was at one stage under 800 million. It's now up to 822 million. It's increased quite significantly in the last 3 years. And 822 million people who struggle every day facing food shortages should be a daily headline, because it's not fake news, it's very real and it has very real impact, and it should be much more newsworthy. So as NGOs, I think we need to be pushing the issue of famine and hunger back onto the global agenda. And we need to promote the work of donors such as the Irish donors and Korea, and the government donors who are playing a leadership role on hunger. Irish Aid and COICA jointly support our livelihoods programs in drought-affected areas in Ethiopia. And last year, we worked with COICA to develop new nutritious food supplements for malnourished children in the urban slums of Nairobi in Kenya. These are just a few of the fantastic examples of innovative and impactful work that is happening, and we need to use these great stories to influence others to invest more in solutions. But not just responding to hunger, but also investing in prevention. And that is really a key part of the work that we do. Early warning, early action saves lives. And prevention is not just a strategy. It's a smart investment, and it's a great story. Responding to climate change starts with solidarity with those experiencing its effects. But when it comes to stopping it, young people now are showing that they have the desire to bring about the level of change that is needed. We know the school strikes and the protests won't stop. The call for change will grow, and the public protests will certainly grow. Usually when I end a speech, I will quote somebody very important like the UN Secretary General, who I think has a lot of things worth listening to. Or I was going to quote from Greta, But because I'm the oldest person in the room, even older than the ambassador significantly, I'm going to quote from another old person who's actually older than me. I'm going to quote from a 77-year-old environmentalist and actor who was at the climate summit. Harrison Ford, maybe better known as Han Solo from Star Wars. And he said, "There is a new form of nature at hand, stirring all over the world. They are the young people who, frankly, we have failed, who are angry, who are organized, who are capable of making a difference. They are a moral army, and the most important thing we can do for them is to get the hell out of their way." But I have one criticism of Mr. Ford. I think he's only partially right. We actually have to work together on this. We have to find ways to combine our experience and our presence on the ground with the energy and urgency of activism that is going on. But finally, by being here today, by you showing your commitment to build a better, safer world for future generations, I am leaving more inspired than I was, and we in Concern will continue to commit to working in the poorest areas, delivering quality programs, and with your support, I truly believe we can make a huge difference. Thank you very much.